On the passenger side rear corner of Kenny's car here, we're going to show you something that most people don't know about Spirit of Motion Grahams. If you notice, we have our gap between the fender and the body. Yeah, that'll be covered by fender weld eventually, but as it was originally. But what's unique here is you see this line? This is the body line. There's your fender line. Now the fender is being worked on not only for position, but we'll show you on the side too. But what's important is that's how your line should look. There's so much adjustment in these fenders that it should line up like this. This fender should not hang down and be offline with that part of the body. If that were true, if that were the way it was supposed to be, the rest of the car would be made that way. It wasn't made that way. It was made to be like this. And so often nowadays, people do not realize that's the way the car is supposed to look. And I'm going to show you on my two cars, that is the way it's supposed to look. Now you see, we've got a nice lineup going here. That required some repair here. And I can see there's still a flaw right there that I've got to do. I know some of you think, oh, there's these flaws here. None of that matters. There's a big rubber grommet that goes over it. You'll never see this. I'm not going to try to edge weld something here that we don't really need to worry about and waste time there. I'm more concerned with the little piece I can still see there that's not right. And I was totally concerned with the lineup. So there you can see what it's supposed to look like. Now I'll show you on my two cars shots showing you that is how they're supposed to look. Fender is supposed to align with the body right there. Now to do that, when you put this fender on, it takes probably about 2 hours to get it on there and jostle it around till it's just perfect. This is not a 2-second job with old used parts. It's an 80-year-old vehicle roughly. So the parts are well used and you have to deal with what other people have done in the past to get this back where it was supposed to be. This side, as I said, needs some repair here, and that is why there's still some, I don't know if you can see this in the video, that there is a slight depression line right there that's got to be fixed. But that shows you how it should line up. I'm also going to show you the opposite side of this car so you can see how bad the driver's side is, because something has been done wrong with the body in the past, and we've got to give a good solution to it, but that's what you should see. Here we're looking at the driver's side rear. Now this fender is currently loose, and I've been trying to figure out exactly how we're going to deal with this, but I think we've found probably the final solution for this one. And I'm going to show you because I'm going to grab onto the fender. If I grab onto the fender, notice I can curve it into position. Now I've played with that position quite a bit and left it loose so I can work with it. I've checked this with a contour gauge and it comes out being very close to the opposite side. It's a 30s car, so it's not going to be perfect side to side. They just don't have that level of tolerance in it. It's part of the reason you've got huge slots. Slots are about this long, like I'm showing between my fingers, all throughout here, so you can move the fender all over the place. But it looks like I've got to get more curve in here to bring this back in. So this fender and the opposite fender already have undercoating on the other side. They're all done on the inside, which is fine. And we haven't done the outside because we need to make sure they're really going to fit up right. So I got to get a little bit of curve in here. I'll have to work on this a bit and then fasten it down. But you'll see you get the same lineup on this side. And when we get that lineup right, so that both sides look the way they're supposed to, the car looks very cool, like it is really supposed to look. As I keep stressing, this fender should not be down here. A lot of people mount them down lower so they get everything to line up instead of making sure that they line up like this, which is what we're after. So we're close to having this fender fit up. Once the fender's fit up, it's easy to take the outside down and put it into prime and get serious about painting it. You notice this side, we don't have the problem we had on the other side. This opening's not so bad, but as I said, they're totally covered up, so there's no point in getting too worried about it as long as the opening's in the right place and everything. We're just going to cover those with the grommets. You'll see that, as I said, when I show you the backs of my cars, but that would be all covered up. But we think we're pretty close to solving this fender problem now. And then both these fenders can be put in prime. We're looking down on the driver's side rear here of my combination coupe. There is right here a reflection, so it makes it maybe look like it is not together. This line is in fact together. I can't put the camera down in between here and the car and get it to focus for you. But this line runs here. You can see where I'm touching it. It runs here. So that's a reflection you're seeing. But they do line up. And that is the way the car is supposed to be. Both sides should align. But setting these fenders so that this will align with the body. Now that we're working with stuff that's 80 years old and we don't have the facilities Graham had, takes a couple hours. Now I'm sure guys who did this every day on a line got used to setting this pretty easily. But that line and that line are supposed to match up, and you can see that my dowel here does in fact show you it's matched up. Both rear corners of the car should match up just like that. You will spend a couple hours getting this on here right, but it's worth everything to have the car look the way it's supposed to look. Here we have the radiator shield totally done for Kenny's car. And you can see all the jewelry's even on it. We did the jewelry a long time ago, meaning we did the red, obviously. And the other part up top was replated. But everything's on with the correct hardware. You want to do this all now because it's very hard to do that if you have it on the car. Even with the cover for the radiator, which goes above it, missing, it's hard to do on the car. One of the problems you run into in working on something like a 38 through 40 Graham sedan is the rear quarter windows and the rubber you're going to use for them. This is a set from Steel Rubber Products. And you can see the part number down here. And I'm going to give you the price on this in a moment, but we're going to talk about why you'd be using this. You're using this because it is impossible to find exactly the right seal for this window. Now I'm going to show you the window with a seal in it. This rubber seal all the way around here was made from that part. Problem is that part's not even close to fitting that. It wasn't designed for it in the first place. It still leaves us a negative that we do build a bit of a pucker here, another little pucker here. And we had to figure out how we were going to take the seal that came from Steel Rubber Products, not for this vent window, and figure out how to make it work. You have to get a hole to line up down here, your pivot points to line up, both on the top and bottom. But in order to do that, you have to cut that rubber seal up. And it's a whole lot more work than you realize because you've never, ever seen this seal, and then you have to make it fit here, and there's no instructions. There's nobody going to tell you how to do it. You're going to physically have to figure it out. And to do this rubber seal, I spent about 5 hours on it. Now, why would you spend 5 hours? Because ultimately you have to figure out exactly where you have to cut it to get these pivots in the exact right spot, and also try to hide it as much as possible. So one is pretty much hidden right in the center of here. The other one's over on the side, and we can kind of see it. But you also have the reality that the reason things like this pucker is if you were to see the original seal laid out, there are slits in the back of it and areas where there's rubber missing, etc. But now you got to figure out where each one of those is going to go, and you have to make new ones by hand, cutting it with an extremely sharp razor blade, bending your rubber back, and guessing where you start, fitting it, taking it out. Okay, I got to go a little more, I got to go a little more. By the time you're done, I had 5 hours in this. There's really 2 cuts on this end to make this end, and 2 cuts on this end to make this end, plus all these hidden cuts. Oh, but there's more than that. See, this particular point goes behind there. But you say, well, it's still here. It's still here. I've got both of them. If I'd have gotten this behind there, I'd have had to cut and leave more slits showing. So you want to minimize that. So in other words, I had to hand cut this out the back so that this particular piece, which is raised up inside of this frame, is going to fit. So all of this takes a large amount of time. But then when you go to glue it together, people say, well, just super glue rubber together. Well, you're right, but you're not right. See, this part's going to sit in the car. That's on the inside. That part's on the outside. There's your seam on the outside here. Turned out pretty good. It almost looks like a mold line. But you can't just use standard super glue. That won't work. There's a reason it doesn't work. The reason standard super glue does not, in fact, work for the job is because the exterior of the car part can get to be 200 to 300 degrees on a nice, warm, sunny day, especially since it's black and it's going to be on the outside, this being the inside, of course. So you have to have a specialized super glue. The specialized super glue is a high temp one. Standard super glues fail between 120 and 160 for most of them. So you can't even consider that. You got to get a high temp one. Same type of thing I use when I make supercharger O-rings has to be used here. You also have to go out and buy a Loctite plastics kit because you need this particular item, which is a bonding agent that you put on one side, and then you put your glue on the opposite side, you put them together, and it bonds instantly. But you do need the applicator like this, which is a nice felt applicator inside. So you go buy one of these sets. I didn't remember what one of them costs. I didn't even charge Kenny for it. That's somewhere around, I'm guessing, between 10 and 15 right now. Plus, you have to buy the special super glue. The special super glue that you're going to use here, which I'm not going to give you it because it's the type of thing that most people don't need to spend that level of money. But for this type of thing, you do. And there's other options, so you can kind of figure that out. You just got to have high temp super glue. But this particular product I'm using is over $30 for a quarter ounce by the time it's delivered here. And it has a shelf life, and it has a life that even if you don't use it, it doesn't last forever. So you're going to do something like this, you want it just for the project, get the project done, be done with it. So 5 hours was spent figuring out the first one. Now the second one, when I did the one for the other side of the car, that only took 2 hours because now at least I know what I'm doing and where I should cut, etc. But you see, when you make your first cut, and you might start here and come around, when you get to the other side, you got to make sure the cut's right, because if the cut isn't right, you're screwed. You mess this up once, you're totally screwed with the whole deal. Here's the other frame for the opposite side. Now down in here, which may be very hard to see in the video, turns out this piece is cracked. It was sent out plated, and it's probably going to be crystallized, or we have hydrogen embrittlement. You can look up hydrogen embrittlement. That usually doesn't matter on more or less decorative parts. Well, I'm going to have to take this part, jig it up, weld it, clean it up, and put it back in here so this is going to come out right. You'll also notice the screw here is too long. Screw here is too long. Now what wasn't explained on the first window is that custom screws have to be made for these. These are just screws holding in place. But I'm going to give you a little drawing of why, particularly the bottom one, but both of them have to be custom made, but the bottom one really needs to be special. And there's a reason for that. That's because at each one of these points up here, top and bottom, on this car, instead of using the original screws and having proper threads, they made them a size larger and rethreaded them. And so it doesn't really work because that would not work with the rubber. So helicoils had to be installed and custom screws had to be made. As I said, it's a little piece of cardstock. I'm going to show you how the screw had to be made. This is our screw body. That's threaded. Well, we had to get it to screw further in, so on this end it had to be turned down. Now, not that much, but it has to be relieved in both areas. Also, its head comes up here like this, but the standard angle right here would not allow it to fit. So this angle had to be redone, and this has to be cut off at a very short length. So it started out as an 832 screw and a 4-jaw chuck. This was undercut so you could screw it in extra, and then the head is modified. We leave the outside of the head so it doesn't look like it's modified. And the end result is we made a special screw. So you spend 15 to 20 minutes doing that. Then you have to part it off. You can't buy the screw that way, and you have to test fit it and make sure you got it right. So you got 15 to 20 minutes in making these little screws, because in putting in the helicoil, helicoils cannot be, if this were your hole and your helicoil is in here, you cannot have the helicoil flush with the top because it'll start coming out when you screw in. It's got to be down underneath. That's part of the reason you have to do this, because we only have so much metal up here that we're putting that screw in. So we have to have this specifically made for the purpose here, so we don't end up with a screw head above this metal. If it's above the metal, it'll cut the rubber up. So this is another special thing that had to be done for both of the window frames. Now the second one I haven't done it for because I've got to go weld it, which was certainly not planned on, but with an 80-year-old part going through plating, you can't guarantee A, it's not crystallized, and B, it won't get hydrogen embrittlement, which is something that happens. And when you get hydrogen embrittlement, you're really concerned about with a part that's going to be doing serious operation, and they're going to do special treatment of the metal so that they will solve the problem, usually a form of a heat treatment. But you don't normally have that problem on a decorative piece, but we do in this case, and now that's got to be fixed. It's a thing you're not figuring is going to happen. And how did I find that out? Because that was previously assembled. Well, when I'm working with the rubber and have to take it apart a couple of times, it cracks right across. And no hard pressure was put on, it just was bad in that spot. So that's just another thing that has to be fixed that people don't realize when you're restoring a car. You can't foresee that that's going to happen. But weird things like that happen all the time. Here are the hood sides in the attic. Nice and safe. All color sanded. When Kenny and Julie saw the car first time in prime, it looked really nice. You can see it's been sanded out, and you're looking at all kinds of imperfections that have had to be filled. The wrinkles you're seeing here are the way Graham stamped the body, so that's not going to be fixed. Same area under the cowl currently, and if you're paying attention, you see some spots where I've circled little imperfections that I'm going to take out by filling a little more sanding, and this will all finally be done under the cowl area.